let's explore guidelines, principles, and the reason behind them that relate to when and how to share. And like so many of these conversations, these videos, I talk about the things that would have been great to hear someone else share with me. And there are so many vacuums, there's so many voids in psychological literacy in our culture, in our outer focus culture, that, I've never heard anyone say what I'm going to talk about here. And it's a starting point, right? Because the key thing is to bring awareness into the arena, and that requires language. It requires presence and thought to be remembered in words. And once our awareness is in the arena, is there, then we can iterate. We can use the sympathy, antipathy, synthesis protocol to relate to some of what's said, reject, rebel, go into antipathy with some or all of what's said, and then create synergy, combining the parts we reject with the parts that we accept, and iteration, new parts that we didn't have before, that make it our own, right? So let's begin. So the thread that I'm using to enter this arena is the awareness that in an effort to respond to traumatic crisis that I didn't know how to respond to. Very briefly, a therapist, Peter Sandhill, escalated a sexual relationship in a therapeutic session, which turned my therapist into a prostitute. And then there's all the cultural baggage around that. And then the cult or culture has a tremendous amount of baggage and mixed messages around homosexuality. So as soon as we enter the arena of homosexuality and prostitution, we are inadvertently and often unconsciously thrust into the weight, the layered weight of all the cult's messages about these words. And so in a dissociative state, in my first psychedelic experience, with a paid therapist, I was given the cult's weight around homosexuality and prostitution, etc. And then there was, the whole abandonment dynamic, right, of an insecure attachment template, starting with both parents, only to find my therapist not showing up, right? You would think that he could have managed to at least show up for his appointments to be paid, but, that was too much for Peter at the time. And so, and then it was too much for the teachers at the Human Awareness Institute who had trained and recommended him. It was too much for them to actually acknowledge the need to respond, right? And, so just layer upon layer of incompetence, of mixed messages, of insanity being given to a therapeutic patient who's asked to pay to receive, this kind of jumbled mess, this fragmented and become a secret keeper with my wife, etc. So all of this added up to way more pain than I knew how to deal with, and so the responses to these pains and confusions and heartbreak, etc. When we don't know how to love this, I just, people would say, "How are you doing?" And I'd say, "I've been sexually abused by my therapist. I'm absolutely terrible and I don't know what to do." And in America, people would just say, "Oh, have a nice day," right? And this was, of course, complete incompetence, right? What it was saying to me is my therapist is incompetent, my parents are incompetent. You know, that was the basis of going into therapy, right? To kind of make sense of all that. The therapist that trained my therapist, my community, my country is completely incompetent to deal with the level of pain that they're inducing in children and adolescents and therapeutic patients. So I was in a pain that I didn't know how to deal with because I was in a cult or culture that didn't know how to deal with this pain. It just knew how to cause the pain. And that is, of course, logical, right? Because if the cult or culture, if all the people involved were really, really smart and absolutely knew how to respond to this kind of pain, they would also be really smart and not cause the pain, right? My parents wouldn't have hit me. You know, my godmother wouldn't have, threatened physical and psychological abuse. My parents wouldn't have played abandonment games out in the forest, right? People would have recognized the PTSD symptoms in childhood. Like if the cult knew what it was doing as it institutionalized layer upon layer of shame and abuse, it wouldn't have done so, right? That's obvious, because to institutionalize trauma and abuse has cost the country, has cost our culture a tremendous amount. Meaning America is more than $1 million poorer because of this trauma, probably $10 million poorer, at least, just in my noticing what I've done, the time off work that I've taken or the time out of the country that I've spent. Because America is not a very great place to go through or recover from PTSD. It's one of the worst in my experiences. And so, if America was smart enough to heal that, it wouldn't have caused it in the first place. It wouldn't have set everyone up to fail. Because when you traumatize a child, everyone fails. The family unit fails. The culture fails. The economy fails. Everything and everyone takes a hit around PTSD. So an intelligent culture doesn't do that to its people. But if it knew how not to cause the damage in the first place, it wouldn't even need to know how to fix it, right? But it would also know that, right? And so obviously I'm learning how to respond from a culture that doesn't know how to respond. And so I don't know how to respond to this. And I'm spilling it out there, hoping that somebody knows how, right? Because I don't. And the responses of the people around me are making it worse in most cases. So I'm then feeling worse. And this is a tricky situation because I'm smart enough to understand that I don't know what I'm doing, right? And maybe there's someone out there that knows what they're doing. I'm also aware that I don't like the facade. I don't like the lies, that I'm being eaten alive inside with shame and panic and terror and dissociative experiences physiologically. But because I'm in an incompetent cult that doesn't know how to respond to that, with therapists apparently capable of making it many times worse and doesn't know how to respond to that either, I don't want to play the game of pretending that everything's fine, because that's kind of part of what maintains the status quo. Is we all have to pretend that this is wonderful, right? Decades of people's lives being submerged underwater into dissociative states, horror, fear-based lives, anxiety. Oh, this is fine, right? It's normal, sure. Meaning a majority of cult members are participants in these experiences, causing them, receiving them, knowing people affected by them. This is all around us. But if everyone agrees to say that it's fine, well, then we don't have to talk about it. So I didn't really want to play that game. That felt a little bit too lonely, to be in the deepest pain. And so I would kind of blurt stuff out, but quickly realized that other people don't know how to deal with it. Well, that's upsetting because I don't, right? And so what to do in these situations? And this is where, I'm kind of developing these guidelines. Like, this is the starting point. Now, subsequently, right, we're now, 7-8 years later, having studied, 1,000 hours of the best psychological literature on what should have happened and what the best practices are. I'm now a little bit more educated in, the damage that was caused and why. In my participation in that and why, right? Because, a therapist says, do this, or how about this, and whatever. And, if I knew what I was doing, if I knew what I knew now, I would just say, no, cut that out. I mean, stop it right here, right? I'm not paying you a dime for this bullshit, right? So but that's now, right? Because we don't bother teaching people an alarming statistic, which is that 12% of therapists admit anonymously to having sexual relationships with some of their clients. And 99.9% of the time, this is bad for the client. So professionals are taking money to help people and then doing something that is not only, illegal, but it doesn't help a tremendous amount of the time. It harms the client. So they're paying to be further abused, right? Well, that would be nice to know going into it, right? To understand that. But a therapist, in the narcissism of let's protect our own interests, does not disclose this, right? None of my therapists ever said, by the way, 12% of therapists have sexual relationships with their clients. It's not good for the clients, and here's why. So this is a risk. My government didn't, nobody educated me. I found this statistic when trying to see why this was such a big deal, and I'd never heard anything about it, right? So, in this context, I now have developed greater empathy, greater understanding, and begun to develop a new identity, a new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that feels healthier in some ways, certainly more informed, more knowledgeable in other ways than the identity, the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that led to the abuse, that led to the trauma, that led to the heartbreak, right? And so, I'm now relatively, meaning relative to what I was before, competent at dealing, loving myself, holding some of these feelings. The majority of people in our cult are not. They're dissociative, sociopathic, etc. And so, so the guideline that I think is important is to give the most tender feelings, positive and constrictive, expansive and constrictive. Let's not say positive and negative, joy, love, they feel great. They're very expansive feelings. Hurt, pain, shame, humiliation, they're very small feelings. It's particularly important to give our small feelings to our most vulnerable feelings, to the people or person or presence in our life that is the most compassionate, the most competent, the most loving of those feelings. Now, how do we know that, right? Well, if our parents or spouse always says, "I'm so stupid for having hurt. What an idiot I am. I feel hurt. I should get over it." Well, that's abuse, right? The hurt is coming up. They're judging themselves for the feeling, which doesn't work, right? So they're demonstrating incompetence and brutality towards their own feelings. Well, don't give them your small feelings. They will do the same to you. You stupid person, get rid of them, right? That doesn't work, right? So you want to find someone who demonstrates the ability to take better care of the small parts, the vulnerable parts, than you can. And that can hold a container better than you can, right? Or you need to hold the container yourself, which admittedly in a traumatic situation is almost impossible, right? So generally speaking, if you can take better care and have more kindness and love for your feelings, then anyone else, sit with your feelings. If you can sit with your feelings and sit with the wound, the pain, sit with the feelings, sit with the pain. Focus on breathing. Right? If it's too overwhelming, you can hold the breath and dissociate. Right? That's sometimes we do it, but can you manage a second? Can you manage 2 seconds? Right? With traumatic type stuff, the big fear is re-traumatization and overwhelm. Well, can you manage a single second? That's it, right? I have to go binge watch Netflix and escape, right, from being aware of my feelings because I don't know what to do and it's overwhelming. And so, okay, do that, right? So be present and then do your distraction and then be present and build the muscle of caring about you. So that's, you should take care of your feelings, or it will benefit you from taking care of your feelings if you are the best person to do it. Now, if someone else cares more about you than you do, beginning with becoming competent, right? Because saying, I love you so much, I want to wire your house and, the electrical, I want to volunteer to, do all the electrical work in your house. I love you so much, I want to help, right? Well, that's first stage help, right? But I love you enough that I want to learn all about electricity and electricity codes and electrical safety so that my help actually benefits you. That's a second level of love, right? I love you so much I want to help. That's first level. But second, I love you enough to take the time to understand the situation so that my help actually benefits you rather than sets your house on fire. That's a whole nother level of love. It's loving enough to become competent in the area that we want to help, right? Here, let me do that brain surgeon. I love you, surgery. I love you so much, right? Oh, you're dead. Whoops. Better next, So it's caring enough to, loving enough to care, but caring enough to understand and practice and become competent. And so if you can find someone who loves you and is more competent than you and loves themselves and you enough to become competent in the area where you need competence, then love yourself enough to give them influence. They're not going to be perfect. They will make mistakes. But what I'm getting at is the more vulnerable you are, that means the more malleable. That's what vulnerability is, right? If someone secretly believes that they're worthless, and most of us do because it's a virus, right? When you abuse a child, they internalize the abuse as their worthlessness. They don't blame the abuser. An infant is incapable of blaming the abuser. The infant takes in that they have no value, otherwise they wouldn't be abused. Now, the infant believes that unquestioningly. And so deep down, when you tell someone you're worthless piece of crap, their infant already knows that. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been abused. They wouldn't have been hit. They wouldn't have been left in the car to almost suffocate on a hot summer day. Their parents would have got rid of the dog that always mauled them and toppled them over when they were 2 years old. They wouldn't be left with that crappy babysitter that sexually molested them, right? They know that they're not good enough to be loved competently, right? Because that's what fills in all of the gaps. And so then when you really wonder, like, am I worthy of love? I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't enter a relationship. I'm just not worthy. I'm weird. Do all these crazy things. I don't think I'm worthy. Well, you're now vulnerable, meaning you're at an uncertain point. I'm not sure, right? Maybe I'm bad. Well, if you give that equation to someone who hates you, someone who's envious, hates you, hates themselves, feels powerless, wants to attack you, if you give that to them, then they will emphasize that, yeah, you are bad, and yeah, you're really not that great, and yeah, I wouldn't date you. You're right. You're just not worthy. That will have a lot of impact. It'll strengthen that belief. And of course, the problem in the loop between reality and belief is it is a loop. When you believe you are unworthy, you treat yourself worse. When you treat yourself worse, you become less worthy. Like, I'm not worthy to eat really healthy, nutritious food, I might say. I'm just not worthy. So I go to McDonald's, I eat out at Dairy Queen, drink a lot of soda, I get fat, I get diabetes, I get ugly, right? We're attracted to symmetry, we're attracted to health and vitality. We find that beautiful. we're not attracted to disease. We're not attracted to, oh, I can barely move, right? We're not attracted. So, but the belief often comes first. Who cares? It's just me, right? It's pointless, right? Nobody loves me anyway. Let me just drown out my sorrow with another beer, another hit of cocaine, another, right? When we destroy our body because we believe we're worthless, we become worth less. Because a person with a destroyed body can give less love than someone with a healthy body. And the same with our mind. When we rattle around in self-pity, resentment, and pettiness, because we're not worth more, well, we become worth less. Because if I can pick between two people and one person is doing their best to make something better, and another person is doing their best to blame the past, which is going to be more worthwhile to spend time with? It's the person who's making the world better, or the person trying to have revenge for the past, right? So at a very technical level, someone who takes care of their heart, mind, and body is worth more to other people, meaning we're all looking to feel sustainably better. All of us want to feel sustainably better. And we want to avoid feeling chronically worse. And the question is, as we look subjectively, not at the innate value of anything, we're not in a position to assess that. Right? Everything has its place. It's all part of the whole. It's all one at the highest level. But at a subjective, personal level, right? If this person is producing value, is creating and curating a beautiful body, is creating beautiful ideas, is honoring those ideas, that's coming out of a belief in which they are valuable. That's coming out of that belief. And if someone is not doing that, then that's coming out of a belief that they're not worthy of that, right? When someone is actively undermining their physical and mental and emotional well-being, there's a belief in that worthlessness, and it's usually transferred as shame, right? As the message of worthlessness in childhood or in dissociative states. It's transferred as shame. And then the person, as they become aware of that, they have to figure out how to deal with that shame and give it back or heal it or lift it or be bound by it, where the message of their worthlessness, etc. So we have a virus of worthlessness, and it's a rampant virus. And so if you give, and we also have an incompetence epidemic, which leads to a scarcity epidemic. All scarcity is correlated to competence. There's an infinite amount of energy out there. But if we're too incompetent to co-create it, to create it, then we can't turn that infinite energy into the fulfillment of our needs, let alone our preferences. Right? And failing to meet our need for love and belonging, but being able to get just the right color sneaker is not a good trade-off. Right? Needs come before preference. And the need for love and belonging in a human species with an empathic brain is fundamental, right? To give up love and belonging, but be able to have pink or maroon sneakers be delivered to your door is a joke. But it's the kind of joke that incompetent cultures make, right? Will deliver the wrong thing to your door. You can't find love and belonging anywhere you look or even have a good definition. But you can have thousands upon thousands of things that don't meet that need delivered in a 2-hour window. Isn't that wonderful, right? Except you've missed the mark, right? You've sinned, right? The bullseye was meeting human needs: survival, security, love, and belonging, self-esteem, developing gifts, bringing those gifts abundantly into the world. That's the need. Pink sneakers are a nice luxury, right? They're very peripheral to that fundamental need, right? And yet a cult that misses the mark will often focus on the peripheral items and ignore the substance. And so that incompetence leads to pain, leads to suffering, leads to scarcity. And the child shames and blames themselves for the scarcity of their cult. Mom and Dad didn't have enough time for me. I'm bad. Mom and Dad didn't know how to give me a good, nourishing diet. I'm unlovable. Mom and Dad didn't teach me the right skills to love and take care of myself. That's because I'm worthless. Right? And then these things transmit. Now, the feelings come from the biological memories, come from the thoughts, the stories that an infant made up about why they weren't being loved better than they were, why there was so much pain, so much scarcity, so much loneliness, so much trauma. Why? Well, every child made that about themselves. And of course, it had nothing to do with the children. That's the irony, right? The only people completely innocent are an infant. They didn't choose to be born. And they are completely vulnerable and malleable and dependent on those around them. And so naturally, it is the infants who take on 100% responsibility psychologically for the scarcity and incompetence of their parents and cult. And then, so now you're vulnerable. The part of you believes that, the child believes that, and everything else grows out of the child. So it's a very deep part. So someone can escalate that, can amplify that message, right? And you only want to give your deepest pains, your deepest griefs to somebody who loves you more than you do, to someone who takes care of them more than you do. And this may not be a human being, right? May not be a human being. It may be a presence. It may be the breath, right? It may be the future, right? Dreaming of a future that's more beautiful, more true, more good than the present time, and living, at least mentally and emotionally, some of the time in that future, and letting that touch us. Maybe taking the time, writing a letter. I'm really sorry to hear that this happened to you. It's not your fault. I just want you to know that. And I'm here for you. And you can write back, right? Because fewer and fewer people in our cult or our culture have such a friend that is reliably, oh, I forgot to write back. That's not good enough. To the part that's wondering if they're good enough, right? Because now you've just proven that they weren't good enough to get a reply, right? So it strengthened that story. Well, I was busy. I was watching Netflix, and of course I didn't have time. Fewer and fewer of us, as we descend into addiction, dopamine addiction, shopping addiction, all the different chemicals that we get from stimulation. I need to be liked more and more. I need this, I need that. All of these things, an addict is loyal to their drug, be it self-importance, be it self-pity, be it their phone. An addict is loyal to their drug, not to the people around them. The people around them are secondary. And in some sense, this is fair play, meaning if a cult responds to the trauma and PTSD in its members competently, the trauma and PTSD is healed and prevented in the first place. In such a cult, you don't need addiction to manage that amount of pain. So, if your friends can truly help you heal PTSD, then they are more valuable than your addiction that helps you manage the pain of PTSD. But if your friends can't, maybe the pain medication is more valuable than your friends who are clueless in how to help you get out of that level of pain sustainably. Right? Because an addiction is a pain management vehicle. But nonetheless, in a cult that does not teach traumatic literacy, we are having a harder time getting out of our traumas, of our stuck places. And so we manage pain, right? And so giving that pain to an addict it just strengthens the message. It's crazy making. It's enraging. Don't you understand how important it is to have a friend right now? Oh, what did you say? Right? That's enraging. It's depressing, right? Because you're looking for support from someone incapable of giving it. And so that's why it may not be a friend, someone around you. It may be a future self. What would my future self do? Oh, my future self would really encourage me right now and be totally there. Like, okay, so there's hope, right? I'm going to become someone. I give my pain to my future self and I say, how do you deal with this in the future, right? Just presence, just love, or maybe you get some insight. Okay, I'll give that a try. And so we want to give our most vulnerable parts. Now, just as importantly, when we're becoming more, when we're exploring our possibilities, what about this? I saw this insight. I want to be a train driver. I want to be I want to become a psychedelic therapist. I have this idea. What do you think about this, right? These are vulnerable things. Why? They're new seedlings. They're threads of probable or possible futures. But they're welling up from within. They're threads of probable or possible futures that contain more beauty, more truth, more goodness than what you've experienced to date than where you are now. They're evolution. They're life. If you reach for that and succeed, it takes you to a whole different level where you can contribute more. Like as you grow and become more of yourself, you can contribute more and more. And so that takes you to the whole level. You say, what about, I'm thinking about this thing, and the other, the other person's like this, and then, text me next week. Text me next week, right? And the message is, evolution doesn't matter, right? You goddamn motherfucking addicts, right? Is nobody paying attention? Like, is this small seedling that one day, if watered, could become a giant redwood, right? Stabilizing a hill, managing soil erosion, bringing 1,500 tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere, regulating temperature, bringing about mists that cooling the planet. This is a big deal. It's now small, but if watered, if loved, if nurtured, it can be brought out into the world. If not, it dies. It's very easy to kill a small seedling. And so the first thing I think is very important for all of us, to the extent that we are able, is to become good at nurturing and holding, to become our best friends when it comes to nurturing and holding the two most vulnerable seedlings, which are our fears, our shames, our pains, our smallest part, and which are, so our smallest part, or our greatest hopes, our greatest dreams, our creativity, right? These beginning ideas that could become so much for ourselves, our family, and humanity if watered, if nurtured. These two things transform a life. Believing in, caring for, and loving our dreams, believing or healing the wounds and lifting the messages that become the self-fulfilling cycles of abuse. I'm a worthless person. So, because I was raped, I'm a worthless person. As a worthless person, I don't care about myself. And I teach everyone else not to care about me either by my example. And then people treat me as a worthless person. And I use that to affirm that I'm a worthless person. So I treat myself even worse. And other people follow suit. Right? Because in an incompetent culture, you have scarcity. And when you have scarcity, you have pain. And when you have pain, at certain thresholds, you have fear of the pain. And when people are acting out of fear of pain, at a certain point, their empathic brain shuts down and their sociopathic, manipulative brain kicks in. And in that state, you will do the most expedient thing to get some of the scarce resources for you at the expense of others. You have become a sociopath in that moment, at that time. And so if someone says, I'm a worthless person, walk all over me, I'll make it easy for you to do that, and you can benefit at my expense because I'm worthless. A sociopath will say, fine, give me the thing, get out of the way, and I'll carry on, right? Because someone who believes they're worthless will invite reptilian sociopathic behavior and reward the sociopath for demonstrating that behavior. And in an incompetent culture, there will be sociopaths. At different points, at different times on the continuum, a majority of people will behave sociopathically at certain levels of fear, of certain levels of pain, created by incompetence. There's an endless amount of energy out there. There's not an endless amount of human competence to meet our needs for survival, security, love, and belonging out of that competence. And so hold on to the things that you cherish. Hold on to your dreams. Hold on to your gifts and abilities. And nurture them as long as you care more about them than anyone in your life. If you are fortunate enough to co-create a friendship with someone capable of truly advocating for you, then let them do so. Open up and share what you really care about. Let them advocate for you if you are fortunate enough to have such a friend, and grow that. If you abuse yourself, and you are very fortunate to have someone who does not, who refuses to take your lead and say, okay, you're abusing yourself, you must be worthless, I'll treat you as a worthless person too, because you believe it. Most people are a bit sheep-like in that area. They will treat you as good if you demand it as you treat yourself. But people will not generally treat you better than you treat yourself. Statistically, in a scarcity dynamic, it sinks to the lowest common denominator, which is set by you, right? How you treat yourself. The better you treat yourself, and reflect that in your outer world, the better life will treat you. It will rise to your level, right? If you drive up in a Rolls Royce with a chauffeur in beautiful clothing, and you're in vital health as you get out, everyone has gotten the message. This is a person that takes care of themselves. Now, this is an archetype, right? It's whatever conveys that. In our cult that says that that's what valuable people do, it's obviously a bit of a flaw in the cult code. Valuable people consume more natural resources, etc. This is, it's faulty code, but nonetheless, within the code, you're saying you're a valuable person. And a majority of people will treat you accordingly because you did. Because you cared enough about yourself to learn the skills, to develop the discipline, to learn the competencies, to apply them, to create value in a way that other people can recognize. So that's, so other people will mirror that back. Whereas if you drive up in a half-rusted, dented Chevette from the 1960s with, cigarettes all over the floor and unkempt hair and clearly confused, the message is clear. You haven't been taking much care of yourself. You obviously don't think you're that worth it. So we'll just ignore you as well, right? And That's not ideal, right? A highly competent culture would look into that and say, hey, we've got lots of abundance because we're competent. Got lots of time because we're competent. And people are our most valuable asset, and they don't develop their potential if they think they're worthless. What have you been doing? Why do you think you're so unimportant as to treat yourself like this? Let's get interested, right? That's a competent culture. But we're not in a competent culture. So if you treat yourself badly, other people will treat you badly as well, right? Because they don't have the abundance, inner resources and out from high competence to have extra to share with you, to teach you. Because it's fun to teach and it's fun to give. If you have the energy, the resources to do so, it's great fun. But it takes competence, So, that's just the way it is. And with that awareness, you do have the possibility of sharing things and connecting with other people. That you can also, if you get good at loving yourself to where you take pretty good care of that pain or whatever, then you can share a story that's just to be of service. Right? In our cult, I wouldn't expect the average person to say, wow, how can we love you because you've shared this pain? But if you are exceptional, meaning you exercise your freedom to diverge from the norms and actually become traumatically literate and become emotionally literate and learn to love and grow yourself, if you're able and willing to do that, then you don't need other people to be competent, to take care of your own dreams, etc. Now you can share some of who you are as a blessing, right? As a gift to be of service to other people who haven't learned how to take care of those things. Right? But that requires a high level of competence. In the short term, you need to protect the seedlings so that they don't get trampled. And understand that it's not personal, right? If something is vital to your soul and nobody around you notices or is interested, it has nothing to do with you. It's vital for your soul. But the question is, will you listen where nobody else does, right? Will you take that seriously? Will you rise and create that? Trusting the value that is inside you. Nurturing that value. And ultimately other people seeing it, right? Elon Musk is a really good role model for some aspects of this. Because, when he sold PayPal, the archetype for a successful young man is to be a playboy on a rich island or, whatever, and, be famous for being famous as they buy different houses and stuff, and, just be famous for being famous, and that's the pinnacle of success, right? To have a few $100 million and I made it and all this stuff. So that's the archetype. And so Elon was caring about some things that diverged from that archetype. His question was, what was most important for humanity? What were the most important problems for humanity to solve? And he realized that sustainable energy, which included transitioning cars to electric cars and becoming multiplanetary were really big issues that he cared enough, that he valued humanity and himself enough to want to put his energy towards. He loved the world, valued the world, to not want it to go extinct in an asteroid collision or something like that. And so he decided to start a space company and a car company and a solar company. And his friends thought he was nuts because no car company in the US had been successful in the last 100 years. None of them, right? They all went bankrupt. Solar was losing money right and left. And only countries had been successful in space and nobody had made any money. NASA had not made money. It had consumed billions and billions of dollars of public funds. And so, in other words, this was an absolute recipe to lose all of his money working very hard and fail. And so his friends sent him videos, look at all the problems with space. These are all the car companies that have gone bankrupt. Don't do it. Be the playboy. But he valued his values. He wanted to speed up sustainable energy. He wanted to build safer, cooler cars. And he wanted this planet to survive the next asteroid collision. That life on this planet would become multiplanetary. That's what he dreamed about. And he valued that. And he was sabotaged and ripped off and lied to and discouraged and mocked. And a cartel of billionaires shorted Tesla more than any other stock in human history to try and get him to fail. But he believed in what was in here, the value of what he was doing. So he put in 100-hour weeks. He put in all of his money. And the world has caught up to him, right? So, because there's a negotiation that's going on at any given point. The world is projecting something, and when something is vulnerable, oh, they'll never succeed, they'll never do it, what a loser. When something is vulnerable and uncertain, it's very common for the majority, the world, to project failure. Because if someone is successful at revolutionizing the world in solar, in transportation, in space, they will change the status quo. They will violate the norms. And the entire world will change, asking everyone in that world to confront the unknown, and with it, the fear of death. People in general would much rather just have the world stay the same so that they don't have to face the unknown and don't have to risk anything awful potentially happening because they didn't know what was going on. Things would just, if everything and everyone would just stay the way they normally did and do this again and again, then it'd be fine, right? Then we wouldn't have to grow, wouldn't have to think. We would know what to expect because it would be the same as it was before. So there's a lot of pushback when people invite radical change, because when the world changes, we either go insane or we change too. And when we change, we face the unknown. When the world changes, we face the unknown. So there's a tremendous amount of fear and hostility at change makers. We crucify the Christ. We crucify evolution. We crucify our future because we're afraid of being out of control. We don't want the change. We don't want to have to, you're supposed to be the lousy negative scapegoat here. Why are you suddenly being positive? Go back to being the way you were. You're supposed to be fat. Here, have another piece of cake, right? You're the dumb person. Be dumb. Well, why are you interrupting the conversation? Be dumb. You've agreed to be the dumb person in the group. Now, you don't want me to be smart? You don't want me to have something to say? No, I don't want to think. I don't want you unsettling things. You're supposed to be the butt of my jokes. That's the deal, right? You've always been the butt of my jokes. I have another joke. You're supposed to be the butt of it. What do you mean you don't want to be the butt of my jokes today? What's wrong, right? So the status quo is not healthy. It's not great. It's just the status quo. It's predictable. It's normal. And so I want it. That's what I want. Control, predictability, normalcy. And so I don't want you to change. Maybe good for you, but I'd have to change too. You have a great job opportunity, but I don't want to have to move to Vermont. I know what's going on here, but maybe Vermont is better, but maybe it's worse. No, you don't want to take that job opportunity. No, it's not. They don't understand you, right? Don't change because I don't want to change, right? That's normal. It's not a good friend. It's just normal, right? Normal isn't a good friend. Normal is mediocrity. So to diverge from that norm, we need to become good friends to ourselves. We need to have beliefs, ideas that go out ahead of us, that we trust and believe on. One of Elon's greatest talent is his faith in what he sees and his willingness to work like hell to realize what he sees to make it the new normal. Now then, once he's the new normal, then everyone likes him, right? Because they've gotten used to it. Now they don't want some other thing to change, right? Because if you can push through the fear of the unknown, all of that, and get to the new normal, then everyone's comfortable again. Everyone's supportive. So you've got a predictable status quo, right? So people are afraid of evolution. They're afraid of change. They're afraid of death. All change brings uncertainty. All uncertainty increases the risk of death, the risk of being out of control. So I hope some of the narratives around here give some guidance about when to share, because you've got the first level, which is you don't know what you're doing, and so you're probably going to pick other people who don't know what they're doing, and none of you will know how to love what's going on, and so it may get worse, it may regress, it may become become more and more sickly in an incompetent environment, right? If you don't treat an infection, it can develop gangrene. If you don't do the surgery, you can die, right? A small wound can get worse in an incompetent environment until you've got so many co-infections that no one in your circle has the competency to heal all that's going on, and then you die, right? And so it's important to develop competency. And part of that is the discernment of when I know how to love myself better than you do, and when you know how to love me better than I do. That's a good level of discernment, because then I can give things to you when you know how to love me more than I do. And I can hold things inside when I know how to love me, even if poorly, better than you do. Right? Because these feelings, these identities, they're like babies. If we say, here, hold my baby. And it's also one of the reasons to limit deep vulnerability to people we regularly have intimate relationships with. And the reason for that is the cycle and the development of love. Love is a seed that gradually blossoms into a flower. It begins by loving enough to care. That grows, and we care enough to take time. I really, really care about you. I just don't have any time for you. That's not true, right? We care enough to take time. And we take enough time to see. We may be needing 4 hours a day for this. We need to take enough time to see. We have to see enough to understand. It's not just I see you and I judge you. I see you enough to understand you. I understand you enough to empathize, to care more, to empathize, to know what it's like to be you. If you understand someone enough, like a biographer who talks with 1,000 people, and tracks your life, they understand enough to empathize with the person they're doing the biography about. I understand enough to empathize. I empathize enough to attune. It's like I really empathize with you, but I'm going to do exactly what I want to do that isn't good for you. That's not empathy. That's fake empathy, right? If you empathize enough, you respond, you attune. And that's what you need. But it's not just responding and attuning. Remember, it's learning the competence to know how to respond. It's saying, I'd like to respond to you this way. Is this going to work? Let's see together. What about giving you a hug in this situation? Oh, you're afraid of hugs. Well, what about holding hands or doing some eye gazing? What will tell you that you matter right now, that you're not afraid of? You learn, so you attune enough to succeed. At what? Not making them feel terrible, not driving them crazy. To succeed at fulfilling their human needs, to survive, to feel secure, etc. And then fulfilling their preferences. That's love. So to give that to ourselves and then to give that to others, that's competence. It's also being an adult. It's also being loving to ourselves and then to others. Hopefully in this terrain, you have a few markers on the trail of knowing how much to share. And if we share things with people who spend enough time with us to empathize and attune, as people love what we share, it will grow, it will blossom. As people hide what, but if you share to someone in a reptilian state who doesn't care about you, they don't understand you, they don't empathize with you, they don't care about you, they will drop the crystal that you give to them. They will leave the baby that you handed them on the park bench. And it's not my baby. And, that's, so these guidelines, who loves the most, who loves enough to really care, And then most of all, owning that ultimately it's our opportunity, it's to our benefit to own the primary responsibility for growing the best of us, for healing the most painful of our wounds, so that we continue to evolve day by day into something more beautiful, more good, more true.